The Amazon rainforest burned around them, smoke thick as fog, the acrid smell of burning rubber and metal mixing with the natural scent of charred wood. Corporate wars had reached even here, where ancient trees once stood as silent witnesses to centuries of life. Now they were casualties in humanity's endless hunger for resources. Elena stumbled through the wreckage of what had been a research station, her environmental suit systems failing one by one. The suit, designed for extreme conditions and toxic environments, had kept her alive through chemical attacks and radiation exposure for 3 years. But now, deep in the Brazilian wilderness, it was killing her. She belonged to the Green Corps, an elite environmental protection unit that operated in Earth's most dangerous zones. Their identities were classified, their faces hidden behind advanced filtration masks and sealed suits. They were ghosts who cleaned up humanity's messes, anonymous protectors of a dying planet. The internal air recycler had malfunctioned hours ago. Every breath felt like inhaling fire, her chest constricting with each labored gasp. She collapsed against a massive mahogany tree that had somehow survived the corporate bombing, its bark scarred but standing. Her vision blurred, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Help," she whispered into her comm unit, but only static answered. Through the smoke, a figure emerged. He was tall and lean, wearing simple field clothes, khaki pants, a torn cotton shirt, hiking boots caked with mud. No protective gear, no weapons, just a weathered backpack and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. This was Dr. Marcus Chen, a field botanist who had been documenting rare orchids when the war machines arrived. He saw her collapse form and ran, his boots splashing through puddles of contaminated water. "I'm here," he said, kneeling beside her. "You're going to be okay." Her voice came in desperate gasps through the suit's speaker. "Can't breathe, please." Marcus examined the suit's readings on the external display. Critical failure across all systems. The emergency locks had engaged, trapping her in a tomb of her own protection. She was suffocating inside the very thing designed to save her life. "Please?" she begged again. "Remove it." Marcus hesitated. He'd heard of the Green Corps, knew their protocols. Removing her suit would expose her identity, violate every rule she'd sworn to uphold. But she was dying before his eyes, and rules meant nothing to a dead woman. His fingers found the emergency release sequence he'd learned in disaster response training. The suit hissed as pressure equalized, seals disengaging with soft clicks. He worked methodically, removing piece after piece of the high-tech armor that had become her prison. The helmet came off last. Golden hair spilled out like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, damp with sweat but catching what little light filtered through the smoke. Her face was pale, lips slightly blue from oxygen deprivation, but even in distress she possessed a natural beauty that took his breath away. Not the artificial perfection of magazine covers, but something real and human, the beauty of someone who had dedicated her life to protecting something larger than herself. She opened her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze. Instead of fear or anger at her exposure, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Elena's breathing gradually steadied as Marcus worked with quiet efficiency. He pulled medical supplies from his pack, not military-grade equipment, but the basic first aid kit of someone who spent months alone in remote wilderness. His hands were gentle but sure as he treated the chemical burns on her arms where the suit's lining had failed. "What's your name?" she asked, studying his face as he cleaned her wounds. "Marcus," he replied, not looking up from his work. "Dr. Marcus Chen. I'm a botanist, was documenting orchid species before." He gestured at the devastation around them. "Elena," she said softly. It had been 3 years since she'd given her real name to anyone. Marcus fashioned a shelter from fallen branches and a tarp from his pack, creating a small sanctuary amid the destruction. As night fell, he built a careful fire, keeping it small to avoid attracting attention from any remaining combat drones. Elena watched him work, marveling at how different he was from the military personnel she knew. Where soldiers moved with sharp efficiency, Marcus moved with the patience of someone who understood that nature couldn't be rushed. Where her colleagues saw obstacles to overcome, he seemed to see opportunities to adapt. "You're not military," she observed. He smiled, settling beside her with 2 cups of tea brewed from leaves he'd gathered. "Stanford University, actually." "Well, was hard to maintain tenure when your research site becomes a war zone. Why did you stay?" "Most civilians evacuated months ago." Marcus looked into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "These forests, They're irreplaceable. Every day I stay, I can document a few more species, preserve a little more knowledge before it's gone forever. Some of these orchids exist nowhere else on Earth. Elena studied his profile in the firelight. You could die here. We're all dying. Somewhere, he said simply. I'd rather die trying to save something beautiful than live safely while it disappears. His words struck something deep in her chest. For 3 years, she'd fought to protect the environment through violence, through tactical strikes and covert operations. But here was a man protecting it through love, through the simple act of bearing witness. I've never told anyone my real name before, she said quietly. Not since I joined the Corps. Marcus turned to her, his expression serious. Your secret is safe with me. It's not about trust, she said. It's about, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be a person instead of a weapon. You were never a weapon, Marcus said firmly. Tools don't make choices. Weapons don't sacrifice themselves to protect strangers. You're someone who cared so much about the world that you were willing to disappear to save it. Elena felt tears she hadn't allowed herself in years. I couldn't breathe in there. Not just physically, I'd forgotten how to breathe as myself. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the recovering forest. Somewhere in the darkness, a bird called a species Marcus had thought extinct in this region. Tomorrow they'll come looking for me, Elena said. The Corps will want to extract me, give me new armor, send me to the next hot zone. What do you want? The question was so simple, yet she realized no one had asked her that in years. Her orders came from above, her missions predetermined, her very identity subsumed into the organization. I want to breathe, she said finally. I want to remember what it feels like to choose my own path. Marcus reached over and gently took her hand. Then we'll find a way for you to do that. Dawn broke gray and muted through the smoke-filled sky. Elena woke to find Marcus already up, quietly cataloging plant samples by the dying fire. He moved with the reverence of someone performing a sacred ritual, handling each specimen as if it were precious beyond measure. You're documenting them, she observed, sitting up carefully. Everything I can, he confirmed, not looking up from his notebook. Even if I can't save them, I can at least ensure they're remembered. The sound of rotor blades cut through the morning air. Elena's extraction team had arrived, right on schedule. 3 military helicopters circled overhead before landing in a nearby clearing, disgorging a squad of Green Corps operatives and medical personnel. Commander Sarah Hayes approached their makeshift camp, her own environmental suit pristine despite the harsh conditions. Elena had served under Hayes for 2 years, respected her tactical brilliance, but had never seen her face either. Agent Voss, Hayes said formally, using Elena's code name. We were concerned when you missed your extraction window. Elena stood slowly, acutely aware that she wore simple civilian clothes, Marcus's spare shirt and pants instead of her armor. My suit failed, Commander. This civilian provided medical assistance. Hayes's helmet turned toward Marcus, who continued his work as if armed soldiers appeared in his forest every day. Dr. Chen, your assistance is noted and appreciated. Our medics will take over Elena's care now. Actually, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm requesting reassignment. The words hung in the air like smoke. Hayes's helmet tilted slightly. Reassignment to what unit? I'm requesting discharge from active duty. The silence stretched long enough for Elena to hear Marcus's pencil scratching against paper as he continued his documentation. Finally, Hayes spoke. Agent Voss, you're suffering from suit failure trauma and possible hypoxia-induced disorientation. These are treatable conditions. Once you've recovered, I'm not disoriented, Elena interrupted. I'm done hiding. Hayes stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that wouldn't carry to the other soldiers. Elena, you're one of our best. The missions you've completed, the lives you've saved. I know what I've done, Elena said, and I know what it's cost me. I've been suffocating for 3 years, Sarah. Not just yesterday in that suit, but every day since I put it on. Marcus finally looked up from his work, meeting Elena's eyes across the small camp. He didn't speak, but his expression was steady, supportive. Whatever she chose, he seemed to say, he would understand. Hayes followed Elena's gaze. This is about him, isn't it? Some civilian you've known for 12 hours? This is about me, Elena said firmly. About choosing to breathe instead of suffocate. About protecting things through creation instead of destruction. Without the Corps, you're nobody, Hayes warned. No identity, no resources, no protection. You'll be vulnerable. Elena smiled, surprising herself. I'd rather be vulnerable and free than powerful and lost. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost sad. I can't officially approve this, but I can't stop you either. You have 48 hours before I file the paperwork. If you change your mind, I won't. Hayes nodded curtly and gestured to her team. Extract the medical supplies and move out. Dr. Chen, you have our thanks. As the helicopters lifted off, carrying away the last connection to Elena's old life, Marcus finally set down his notebook and approached her. Are you sure about this? He asked gently. Elena looked around at the scarred but recovering forest, at this man who had chosen love over safety, documentation over escape. I've never been more sure of anything. 6 months later, Elena stood in a makeshift medical tent in the mountains of Nepal, her hands steady as she sutured a Sherpa's climbing injury. The altitude made every breath precious here, a reminder she no longer took breathing for granted. She and Marcus had found their calling together. He as a field researcher documenting climate change effects on high-altitude ecosystems, she as a wilderness medic treating injuries in the world's most remote places. They traveled light, lived simply, and woke each morning choosing their own direction. The bleeding stopped. She told her patient and carefully practiced Nepali. Rest for 2 days before attempting the descent. The Sherpa nodded gratefully. Word had spread among the mountain communities about the Western woman who treated anyone who needed help, who asked for nothing in return except the chance to serve. Outside the tent, Marcus was setting up equipment to measure atmospheric conditions. At 18,000 feet, his research had evolved beyond simple documentation. He was now collecting data for climate scientists worldwide, his work helping predict how changing weather patterns would affect these ancient communities. Elena watched him work, still amazed by the quiet dedication he brought to everything. In 6 months together, she had never once seen him compromise his principles or take shortcuts that might harm his research's integrity. How's our patient? He asked as she emerged from the tent. Stubborn. Wants to guide another climb tomorrow, despite the injury. Marcus smiled. Reminds me of someone I know. Their relationship had grown slowly, naturally, like the high-altitude plants Marcus studied. No dramatic declarations or passionate scenes, just the steady deepening of two people who had chosen to see each other clearly. Elena had changed in ways she was still discovering. Her former colleagues wouldn't recognize the woman who now wore her hair in a simple braid, who smiled easily at strangers, who had learned to find strength in vulnerability rather than armor. There's a storm coming in, Marcus said, checking his instruments. We should head down to base camp. As they packed their equipment, a young woman approached Pima, daughter of the village elder, who had been helping Elena translate for patients. Dr. Elena, she said in English, my father wishes to speak with you both. They followed her down treacherous paths to the small stone building that served as the village center. Inside, a dozen elderly villagers sat in a circle, their faces weathered by decades of mountain life. The elder, a man whose age was impossible to determine but whose eyes held the wisdom of countless seasons, spoke in Nepali. Pima translated. He says the old ways of healing are being forgotten. The young people go to the cities. The traditional knowledge dies with each elder. He asks if you would stay through the winter, learn from them, teach them what you know. Elena looked at Marcus, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his expression. They had been wandering for months, helping where they could but never staying long enough to build real relationships, real impact. Tell him we would be honored, Elena said. That night, as wind howled around their small stone shelter, Elena and Marcus lay close together under heavy blankets, talking quietly about the future. Are you happy? He asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. Elena considered the question. Happiness seemed too small a word for what she felt. I'm alive, she said finally. For the first time in years, I feel completely alive. No regrets about the course? The missions you're not completing? I'm completing a different kind of mission now, she said. Instead of fighting to save the world through destruction, I'm learning to save it through connection. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I love you, he said simply. The words settled between them like snow, natural and inevitable. Elena turned to face him in the darkness. I love you too, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing to be seen. 3 years had passed since that first night in the burning forest. Elena and Marcus had built something neither had expected, not just a relationship, but a life of purpose that spanned continents and seasons. They now stood in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon, where they had established the Chen Voss Institute for Environmental Medicine. The small research station and clinic served the scattered communities of loggers, rangers, and scientists who worked in the region's protected forests. Elena looked out over the valley where they had chosen to put down roots, watching morning mist rise from the river below. At 32, she had lines around her eyes from squinting in mountain sun, calluses on her hands from building their clinic, and a deep contentment she had never imagined possible. The supply drop should be here soon, Marcus called from inside their cabin, where he was preparing specimens for shipment to partner universities worldwide. Their work had evolved into something bigger than either had originally envisioned. Elena's medical expertise, combined with her knowledge of extreme environments, had led to breakthroughs in wilderness medicine. Marcus's climate research had become essential data for conservation efforts across the Pacific Northwest. But more than their professional success, they had created something personal and profound. Their love had grown not in the dramatic intensity of crisis, but in the daily choice to see and support each other's truest selves. Elena heard the familiar sound of an approaching helicopter and stepped outside to guide it to their landing pad. As the aircraft settled, she was surprised to see Commander Sarah Hayes emerge, no longer in military gear but wearing civilian hiking clothes. "Elena," Hayes said, approaching with a cautious smile. "You look well, Sarah." Elena embraced her former commander, genuinely pleased to see her. "What brings you to our little corner of the world?" "Official business, actually. The Environmental Protection Agency has been following your work here. They're interested in expanding the model, establishing similar clinics in other remote areas." Marcus joined them, offering Hayes coffee and a seat on their porch overlooking the valley. "I've also come to apologize," Hayes continued. "I thought you were making a mistake when you left the Corps. I couldn't understand choosing vulnerability over strength." Elena settled beside Marcus on their handmade bench, their shoulders touching in comfortable familiarity. "I didn't choose vulnerability over strength," she said gently. "I chose a different kind of strength." Hayes nodded, looking out over the peaceful valley. "I can see that now. The Corps has lost 3 more operatives this year to what the psychologists call identity dissolution, people who forgot who they were underneath the armor." "Are you thinking of leaving too?" Marcus asked. "I'm thinking of changing how we operate," Hayes replied. "Instead of creating ghosts, maybe we need to remember that we're protecting a world where people can be human." They talked through the afternoon about possibilities, new models of environmental protection that honored both security and humanity, ways to serve without disappearing, methods of healing that went beyond just treating symptoms. As evening approached and Hayes prepared to leave, she turned to Elena one final time. "Do you ever miss it? The adrenaline, the sense of being essential to something bigger?" Elena looked around at their simple home, at Marcus organizing his research notes by lamplight, at the forest that surrounded them with its ancient patience. "I found something bigger," she said. "Something that doesn't require me to disappear to serve it." After Hayes departed, Elena and Marcus walked their evening circuit around their property, checking equipment and enjoying the transition from day to night. This had become their ritual, a time to reconnect after the day's work, to appreciate what they had built together. "Are you interested in expanding?" Marcus asked. Working with the EPA could mean real funding, broader impact, Elena considered. As long as we don't lose ourselves in the process. The moment we start hiding who we are to serve an organization, we stop," Marcus finished. "I agree." They paused at their favorite spot, a clearing where Marcus had first proposed, not with grand gestures, but with the simple observation that he couldn't imagine doing this work, this life, with anyone else. Elena turned to face him in the growing darkness, still marveling at how completely she could see him, how completely he could see her. No armor between them, no barriers, no secrets. "I can breathe here," she said, a phrase that had become their private shorthand for contentment. Marcus smiled, pulling her close. "So can I." Above them, stars emerged in the clear mountain sky, and Elena felt the deep satisfaction of someone who had removed her armor and discovered that what lay beneath was not weakness, but wings.